All right, welcome to Chardonnay All Day. Maybe the most important section of the wine list could be, and maybe also the most thought about section of the wine list, right? People have very particular tastes in what they expect from Chardonnay. This is one of those varietals that depending upon what the winemaker does to it, there's so many different expressions, right? If I'm expecting a wine that's made like Trefethen, right? And I get a glass of wine that is made like Alban, I'm not happy if that's not what I was expecting, right? So this, as we go through these training videos and as you're working with your management team and your mentors and your trainers through the process, this is a section that really needs to be focused on. So a quick run through of what we're currently pouring by the glass and why we're pouring them. So stylistically, a few things happen with Chardonnay. The grape itself either gets put through second fermentation by the winemaker, which is called malactic fermentation, which takes the mallow and turns it into lactic and or like the acids you find in milk. So it takes that tart acid and turns it into that smooth creaminess. So when people are talking about, I want a big, buttery, creamy Chardonnay, they want a wine that went through malactic fermentation.
You're essentially talking about
so
wine
that would be one hope.
As butter.
As butter, right? Or our Oban. So one hope. This is like, you know, quote unquote, this would be our house Chardonnay, right? People come in and they just want a glass of Chardonnay. This is probably better than what they're expecting, honestly. This has gone through some mallow. It's a bit buttery. It's a bit oaky. It's a bit acidic. It doesn't kind of go one way or the other too hard.
It walks a real middle road.
It kind of is like, it's Chardonnay. And so someone's going to be really happy
Chardonnay
with that. You know, one of my favorite wines by the glass, and I know in the video prior, right, you've gone through the training, but Sean keeps saying this is his favorite wine by the glass, right? But we have a lot of favorites. One of my favorites in this section is, again, it's still a California Chardonnay, but this does not go through any malactic fermentation. So this is made almost more like a French Chablis, which does not go through mallow, but yet does see oak. So that's what you're going to see. So again, I think oak plays a big part in Chardonnay.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
You know, moving down the list, boom, we're into Chablis, right? Chablis is a very specific area in France, right, that can only grow Chardonnay. You know, it's from the Burgundy region. So in Burgundy, France, when we talk about white Burgundies, it can only be Chardonnay, right? Bordeaux, Sauvignon Blanc. We're now into Burgundy. It can only be Chardonnay. Very important to know that. So, and then in the Chablis region of white Burgundy, it typically never sees mallow, and a lot of the times it won't see any oak as well. So this is stainless steel fermented. Again, it's like the simplest expression of Chardonnay, which I love personally, because I find it to be a little bit more food friendly. Is sometimes, and again, I know I go against the opinion of a lot of our consumer base, right, of what I want in my Chardonnay, and therefore then we jump up to the Oban from Santa Barbara, as a chef, one of my favorite wine regions in the world is Santa Barbara, because you get these intensely hot coastal days, right? But at night, that valley is like freezing cold, right? So it really drives that acidity at night in those different wines. So why don't you take us through, from a sales perspective, on the floor, these very kind of somewhat difficult wines to understand, but once you get it, you get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and as Sean was saying, Chardonnay, one of the biggest sections of our list, because that definitely is where the demand tends to be the most. Very basic, but I usually start off, if somebody's sitting down asking me about Chardonnays, the first words you want to use is oak and butter. Gives you a good gauge on what, as Sean was saying, you're looking for. If somebody tells you, you know, I drink things like Rombauer, I like really oaky, buttery ball wines. You don't want to be directing them to a Chablis. You don't want something that's never had any malolactic, never sees any oak, because that's not going to be what they're looking for.
And I think that would be a quote unquote like, I drink California style.
Yeah.
I think California has become, although we're seeing a major shift against this right now, but I think the drinker that comes in and says, I want a California style Chardonnay. They're looking for oak, and they're looking for malolactic fermentation, which comes across as creaminess, buttery, those kind of descriptors.
And so, you know, if you compare these to the other videos, you can already see that the coloration on these wines is changing. You're getting a little bit more of a deeper yellow, almost like a gold color to them. The first one on here is the One Hope, as we were saying before. This one is just going to be a very well balanced, middle of the road California Chardonnay. It's got a little bit of oak, got a little bit of butter, great acidity, easy drinking. Like a little bit more pronounced fruit, so if somebody is looking for something a little bit fruitier from their Chardonnay, this is probably the one you want to go with. You know, not much more to be said about it besides this is your entry level. This is kind of, I'm looking for just a house Chardonnay, I just want to drink some California Chardonnay, this is where I want to go.
Little bit of vanilla, little bit of cream, and that vanilla gets picked up from the oak, right?
Yeah,
like
that's
when someone says vanilla, that's they're picking up the oak on the wine. So a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of cream, and I think it does have that acidity though. It's but it's like young citrus fruit acidity. You know, it's not lemon. It's more like mandarin orange, which is it really makes it a nice approachable wine.
It's an acid, but it's a little more softer. It's not quite as racy, citrusy like a Pinot Grigio or something might be, where it's really cutting through. Second one on there is the Trefethen. This one's actually probably one of the more well-known California Chardonnays out there right now. So a lot of times this guy will kind of sell himself. This is, like Sean was saying, it doesn't see any malolactic fermentation. This is, you know, an easy upsell in just California Chardonnay drinkers in general, but also for somebody that wants more of what he was saying with the vanilla, kind of the more oak characteristics without so much of that buttery creaminess. This one's going to have a little bit softer acidity, a little bit more pronounced fruit on the nose, but finishing kind of very dry. Just, again, a very easy drinking one, but with a little more structure to it. This guy will hold up to a little bit more of your creamy foods. This one goes well with things like our gnocchi, with kind of more creamy sauces. You know, a lot of people always look for, when they're pairing wines with food, they always look for the contrast, the acidity to cut through things. But you can also complement. You can also do creamy, oaky, buttery with creamy, saucy, more full-bodied kind of foods.
I pick up on this, which is not overly normal for Chardonnay, is like the white peach and the green apple. And again, this is a great stepping stone into getting to some of our more expensive and more complex white burgundies, because it's from California. So to some degree, as a salesperson on our floor, as a server, you move someone into this wine and they like it, and then you tell them, you say, you know, this is actually made more in the Burgundian style. This is not seeing malolactic fermentation. You know, you're getting that butteriness from the fruit itself and from the oak aging. You know, so it's like, hey, you really like this? Do me a favor, the next time you're in, let's talk about Chardonnay, let's talk about something else, whether it's jumping into this next wine, the Chablis, or we even go back to the list in some of our bottle of the white burgundies, or even the Pouilly Fussé.
On to this next one, we're doing the, right now we're pouring the Albert Bichot for the Chablis, as Sean was saying. Chablis 100% Chardonnay. Probably the most well-regarded Chardonnay region in France, I would think. This is, you know, if I'm thinking of French Chardonnay, I'm thinking Chablis first and foremost.
I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second, though, because it drives me crazy, because you know how much I love Chablis. Is that Chablis in the 80s got such a bad name because of boxed wine made in America calling themselves Chablis. So a lot of times people are like, that's immediately where their mind goes. So we have to like redefine to them of, hey, Chablis is my favorite wine, and they look at you at the table like, okay, and you're like, hey, listen, well, if you like Chardonnay, let me tell you about no malolactic, stainless steel fermented, from Burgundy, and just, you know, I just took a sip of it. You know, you can see that beautiful golden hay color. Is like, again, I'm salivating. I want to eat food, but I feel like I could eat more complex seafood with this, because it's got a backbone to it.
Yeah, absolutely. As you were saying, this is kind of like we were talking about the Sancerre in the last video. This is the purest expression of Chardonnay you're probably going to find on the market. Again, just very crisp acidity, but not quite as racy and aggressive. A much softer food wine. It's a great complement to oysters, whitefish, a little bit more of your cream sauces, things like that. And as Sean was kind of saying before, one thing that I've noticed selling wines on the floor is, especially as you kind of build regular clienteles, you can move them up in stages. You can get them, if somebody's asking you about Chardonnay their first time in, and you move them up from one hope to a Trefethen. You might tell them, hey, next time you're in, let's explore some Chablis. Let's move on to, maybe you want to see what it's like in Santa Barbara. Like, there are other things we can kind of try and get you into, and you can kind of build that guest palate over time to get them into some really exciting wines that we do by the bottle only. Last one on here, as Sean was saying, is probably one of his favorites, the Aubin Clément. This is one of two. You'll notice that we have a Coravin for this. This is one of two wines by the glass that we use a Coravin for. We might do a demonstration for you in a later video, or your managers can kind of show you how these guys work, but we use that just to kind of preserve the freshness of this wine a little bit longer.
It's a very expensive wine that is really a treat to pour by the glass, and that's why we use the Coravin, is because, we open a bottle of Trefethen, One Hope, Chablis, we open multiple bottles every day. We're pouring through it, whereas you may go a day or two without selling a glass of Aubin. Although the popularity and because of our extensive wine training, and because I think our service team has fell in love with this, we were selling more and more of it, but it preserves it. And just to back up one minute, back to the Chablis, you mentioned Rombauer, which we have on the list, right? That's the ultimate, I want a Napa Valley, big oak bomb, buttery, I want to feel like I'm at the movies eating popcorn type of Chardonnay. That person, they are not going to like this wine. So if that's where they're going from a training standpoint, but boom, you jump over to this, right? Now you're in that world. But I think you're in that world with even a little bit more sophistication, because I think you're finding that balance. It's not just all oak, it's not just all butter. You're still getting that minerality and that acidity. And that's why, I remember the first time tasting this wine, I was like, that's the wine. Yeah. That's the ultimate Chardonnay drinker's wine. And so for us to be able to pour that by the glass, I think is a treat for the guests.
Oh, absolutely. And as you were just saying, this one, sees oak aging, you definitely get a little bit of the butteriness. I take a whiff, and the first thing I get is that strong vanilla notes. This one is such a great example of the use of oak in a Chardonnay. As Sean was saying, if you've got somebody that normally likes to drink those big butter balls, this is a great way to get them into something that still runs in that range, but changes it up just a little bit. Maybe introduce them into something else. Maybe show them that there's different ways to present that butter in your Chardonnay without just going over the top.
Well, you can look at the color in general and see that this has spent so much more time in the barrel, right? It's aged longer, therefore really coming into its own. And where we're talking green apple and white peach with some of these wines, now we're talking lavender, caramel. It's a totally different expression with deeper flavors that will stand up even to bigger foods, right? You need a bigger wine to be with those bigger foods. So if someone at the table was eating a filet mignon and I'm eating the Chilean sea bass, that's the wine you want to go with, right? As if we're in the white wine world. So. And then the next step that we'll discuss in training on the floor itself is jumping up into the white Burgundy section of our menu. So again, we talked about white Burgundies in France. It's a big section of our menu. We're getting into much more sophisticated old world wines that are the nuances are very regional throughout white Burgundy, right? Whether you're in Pouilly-Fuissé or you're in Meursault, whether it's a village wine, a Grand Cru, a Premier Cru, stuff that you'll all learn while you spend more time through your training at the wine. So great section, amazing wines, and we'll get on to the next.